the intro music. Yeah! Woohoo!
All right, you've been asking for a while. We're gonna start going over the Strike Team officers right here, starting with this month's iteration, Strike Team Explorer. And what better way to show you what you can expect in this video than watching my Valdor go boom versus an Enterprise that isn't even using Strike Team. Even though I thought Strike Team were supposed to be OP and cover everything and do everything in the world. And okay, so I will go ahead and say this, that Strike Team, including the Explorers, are probably your best PvP set in general. There's a lot to really take into consideration when you're talking about the Strike Team as a whole. For example, the Valdor, yeah, not the strongest bird. She's only tier 5. Still, you expect to win. Keep in mind though, I'm going against a maxed Enterprise here. Enterprises have a natural advantage with those shields. I will say real quick that most of the logs you'll see today are between Enterprise. We've got Valdor, ikat'ika, and a little bit of Augur. I threw the Augur in there to show you what Strike Team Battleship can really do. It's kind of like a side-to-side comparison. I did not take on any interceptors because naturally an Explorer is going to have an advantage over that. So you want to see if maybe we could flip the triangle, which we know Battleship Strike Team can do. We've seen Battleship Strike Team take on interceptors and still win. We'll cover that in their video. But today we're going to focus on this right here. So shout out to the two people who helped me out the most. We've got them they're both sitting here, Adam and Bird. Good to see you. Appreciate y'all both. So we've got a list of logs. You'll see a lot of defeats here. I'm going to scroll down to the very bottom and we'll start with some of the basics of what we're going through. So what I wanted to do with some of these logs is kind of go through and say, hey, let's piecemeal it and start off with what can these officers do individually, just one by one, going against random PvP crews. So this ikat'ika running just a random critical build for early punching, as well as a mid build. One of the few people who actually have Galron kind of leveled up, which is kind of neat. Anyway, you see me losing handily here to the ikat'ika, but don't worry, I do beat the ikat'ika. But in terms of logic based, what was I going for here? Well, here's my morale. Then I've got Tio Sahura for the shield change, and then more shots, but not really effective. One thing I will say as a positive, and I'm going to go into the officer menu to talk about this real quick, and I'm curious anybody who has these, what y'all have found. But in my opinion, the the Strike Team Explorer group is the most versatile of the group. The reason I say that is, one, they can be used outside of normal PvP battles. For example, Pon, who is your Bream, is actually really good in base defense. A lot of people have been adding him to their bold base defense because of the Breen Serve Cold. Pon decreases an opponent's critical chance by 57% at the start of each round for 3 rounds if you have morale. Now that 57% is based on what I have him at tier 2. He does scale up. We won't go over individual scalings in this video because I know most of you are working on the premise of having them at tier 1 or tier 2 because sourcing for these is extremely difficult. But if you're watching this at a later date, it does scale up pretty high and it is very effective to countering something like an Honor Guard Wharf, which you'll see here in a minute. And you've got ikat'ika, who is created to win, increases weapons damage by 55%. Again, this is tier 2. It does scale up, but I'm not super excited about him. And in terms of which ones I lay off, he's usually one I don't use too often. And then Weyoun is actually very good in base raiding. You can use him with Kirk, Rom, Weyoun as a combination to get the multiple shots just stacking on top of each other. Actually pretty effective and pretty useful. So versatility they actually have. And instead of running full Strike Team Explorer, I actually have found that they're better piecemealing them and using them for specific scenarios or simply combining them with other things. So if we go back to some of these other early battles, you see a victory that I managed to pull out was piecemealing, running Kirk, Sharvanik for the piercing boost, and then Weyoun. Now, he is running just kind of a faulty crew here because there's no morale on that ship. So this is more just me trying to punch up on a ikat'ika. But was just to kind of see, can it actually get a victory somehow? And did manage to find that. But that wasn't the only victory, so please don't take that as kind of like the baseline. We have more. So let's go move up to the Atom fight. This is me showing you the baseline of what I told you that the Augur could do. And just as expected, even running full Strike Team on a max Enterprise, this is not a max Augur, wipes the floor with it. Wasn't even close. But we know that Strike Team Battleship is, dare I say, OP, especially on the Augur and the Tribune, both epics for 3-star and 4-star in particular, take massive advantage of the Strike Team. And the Daedrix at level 60 also enjoys Strike Team as well. But this is the strongest crew. So it's really difficult to say, hey, if we're just comparing apples to apples, then we would say, okay, well, then obviously Strike Team Explorer sucks in comparison. But the truth is, you still have victories here. So for example, here's a piecemeal version. Again, remember when I said that I would usually cut off ikat'ika? Well, here's kind of why. That small increase that you'll see, and we do Battlelog stuff on the Twitch all the time, where damage boost is okay. And I'm not saying that ikat'ika is worthless, but piercing, taking advantage of that, and then I've got Pawn, so I'm battling a critical build. I've got Wei Yun here for more shots. End up winning pretty handily here, going against the triangle and against an okay PvP crew. So you can win, but the piecemeal strategy is where I'm finding the most success. Move on to another one with Adam here. This is my Enterprise going against his Max Enterprise. So 2 Max Enterprises here, and you can see power-wise, basically identical. Him running full strike team, with me running Kirk, Marcus, Honor Guard Worf. No strike team, a regular PvP group. In theory, like if this was the Battleship strike team and I was going Augur versus Augur, the opposing Augur had Battleship full sin, and then I had just a generic anti-Romulan run, I would get my butt kicked. Not here. In fact, in certain situations, this is why Strike Team Explorer is the weakest of the 3, but doesn't make them bad. And let's just go ahead and explain why. And if you like this explanation, we'll like the video. The biggest reason that it struggles is Wei Yun's captain's ability, actually, with 8 rounds of a limitation to starting morale. Why is that a problem? Well, we can hit the Battlelog button to kind of find out why. This fight goes 29 rounds. I mean, the Enterprise only has morale for less than a third of this fight. And what you'll find is that the lower tier the PvP battle, the better Strike Team Explorer feels. So if you've got, say, a tier 4 or tier 5 going against a tier 4 or tier 5, well, they usually don't last that long because those ships don't have as much hull health. They don't have as much shield health. It takes longer to get through all those things. So feels like it punches harder. And what I've had a lot of my friends talk about is like, hey, on a Coronar, Strike Team Explorer feels great. Well, Coronars have more hull health, and as you tier them up, they're going to be beefier. Thus, also put out a crap ton of DPR. Remember how I always used to say that the Coronar is sneakily almost as good as the Pylum? Because it is. It actually creates a ton of damage, shorter fights. That's what the Pylum can help create. So on a shorter fight, the Strike Team Explorer feels great, but depending on where you're at in the game, Strike Team Explorer feels very underwhelming. But I do want to give it credit for having value in terms of versatility. I love that I can use Wei Yun as a base raider. Well, that Pawn is great for base defense, especially if you're using that bold base defense that we've talked about in the past and that DJ made a video about. So if you're using those tactics, Strike Team Explorer definitely has value to go after versus just straight PvP, which many people maybe only do during incursions. But there is still value. Look at another Battlelog here. This is my Valdor going against an Enterprise with full Send strike team. This is just a generic Valdor PvP crew. Now, if you remember the first log I showed you, I lost. So 11.7 million Valdor lost to a Max Enterprise pretty handily in that last log. Well, here they're running full Send. I'm running a generic PvP crew for the Valdor. Yuki Marcus usually is not effective versus an Enterprise. Why? Because the Enterprise shields never go down, except when you go past 8 rounds. Again, this is the limitation of Strike Team Explorer, and it comes down to Wei Yun. Now, Wei Yun's officer ability is really, really good, and the more you can level him up, the more you're going to want to use him at any stage in the game. But his captain's ability kind of falls flat compared to, say, Strike Team La'an, who I think mostly all acknowledge is probably the best of the group. I think everybody would acknowledge that, right? Now, here, let me show you the piecemeal strategy again that I talked about. This battle only going 18 rounds. Oof. But still, I piecemealed it. I used Wei Yun, but put criticals with piercing, and I won handily here. So piecemeal, I find that between Pawn and because Pawn is an immediate counter to critical builds, which is really nice. And he can outpace Honor Guard Worf very quickly, especially the higher you get him leveled up. But as you go through, you're going to find that the biggest hangup is the fact that this captain right here does not have a round limitation. That one over there does, and that is the biggest difference between the two. So if Strike Team La'an only gave 140% to weapon shots for 8 rounds, and that was it, then maybe that limitation kind of balanced out a little bit. But Strike Team Una is still ridiculously good. Oh, she's so good. But because Wei Yun has that limitation, you end up finding a lot of these defeats. And that doesn't mean that it's, perfect. Again, just running different mitigation crews. That was actually only a 200% to dodge there. Just trying out different basic sets. And honestly, that PvP crew is not something you'll probably see very often. Just a full Klingon, double mitt critical build. That's not a great crew, but again, I wasn't trying to go against peak crews. I was trying to see, can we have effectiveness here? And even running anti-critical and TOS Kirk with Wei Yun still end up losing mightily. So again, it's about finding that balance. The thing with Strike Team Explorer is you can have success with them, but generally full send synergy is not going to be your most effective unless it's, say, your secondary or third PvP crew. So for example, if I'm on my Enterprise, I might still run this, but that's because I've got my Valdor out already, and I've got ikat'ika, and I've got Strike Team Battleship on my Augur. So then it just kind of becomes secondary and you use it. But as a whole, when you talk about their value, Strike Team Explorer, the weakest of the three, but still has a lot of value. And I think that you'll find things like on a Coronar, on Enterprise A, a lot of these things can change. It really depends on how these officers work and how it affects your particular situation. Again, shout out to these two guys who came and helped me with the logs. Always appreciate the community helping out. And I just want to give y'all a glimpse of how it works. Now, if you want to know some more of the math, honestly, just ask in the comments or hit me up directly. But it's pretty self-explanatory to me. We'll go over the officers one more time in the, what would you even call this panel? Yeah, I realize it's the officer screen, but anyway, Silver Tongue, 100% chance to apply morale for 8 rounds on combat start. Now keep in mind that there's some synergizations that you got to keep in mind with Wei Yun, because it's not typically 100%, but I've got him full synergized on a ship right now. So if you're talking about just a stock Wei Yun, he's 20%, but he gets 40% from each synergy buff. So that means if you were only running one, you would get 60% instead of 100%. Still pretty good. But I know some of y'all are really big sticklers for RNG, but the Manipulate, Cajole, and Deceive is a very good ability that I love. It does stack with other shot stacking abilities, which is really nice. So you can take advantage of that. And you've got Pawn, Lost in Translation as a captain, 10% chance at the start of combat to delay opponents' weapons for 3 rounds. I know a lot of people have talked about this and using him potentially as captain over Wei Yun. So running like Pawn captain, Wei Yun, and then like Kirk on the side. You can do that. I have not really found great success with it with my ships, so I didn't include it in the video. But if you have, let me know and we can cover it in another one, because I brought a battleship strike team here. I think they're all intertwined at this point. So, and then finally, you can take an Honored Elder, increases mitigation stats by 20% for 1 round every round when fighting players. I'm not a huge fan of it, but it does scale. So if you do want to run full synergy with this one, you can. Now, if you're curious what that is, he's 20%, and then he can get 25 from each side. So 70% max. Again, not super good, but it's okay. And then Created to Win is a weapons damage boost, which will max out at 80%. So it goes 53, 55, 62, 70%, and then 80. So it does end up getting decent. At 80 though, it's okay. I mean, if the longer it goes, the better it feels. But again, your goal, mostly because of Wei Yun, is to have a shorter fight. So piecemealing this is a great crew. Full send, maybe not your best, but hopefully now you understand how they works, and hopefully you enjoyed the video. I like doing strike teaming videos and officer videos. They're actually really fun to me. Let me know if you did by commenting in the video down below. If you comment, it actually helps out the channel. It also lets me get a chance to interact with you and answer any questions that you might have. And if you also want to help out the channel, well, hit the like button. So it looks like this thumb here, and if you click it, it improves. And if you hit the subscribe button, you know every time I go live and every time I make a video here on YouTube. So that's actually pretty handy too. Live long and prosper. Stay safe for the Space Cowboys. Deuces, that's me. Catch you on the next video, which no, will not be Battleship Strike Team. It'll actually be, the next video is probably the state of the game for December, where me and DJ are going to be interviewing Eco. But I don't know. We'll see. Could be something different. Who knows? You have to be here to find out. Bye.
An even better outro than the intro. For the Empire and glory to your house.